Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir. I am one of your co-hosts today. And as always, is Austin Davidson, our other co-host. How you doing, Austin?
I'm doing good. Hello, everybody.
So, as you can now hear, I sound like myself, not like I'm over the phone now. I'm finally hosting an episode for the first time since late December. The entire month of January, I was either unable to host an episode or I was unable to even be a part of an episode due to being on a cruise. But it's been almost odd to kind of reopen everything and kind of take a look back at kind of what's transpired since I last hosted an episode. The Steelers season hadn't even ended yet, and now here we are about to recap Super Bowl 53. And before we get into that game, Austin, I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of where the Steelers are headed as we approach the offseason. We got a little bit more news with Antonio Brown, as it seems to be the case now on a weekly basis. Something new happens with him, including a domestic dispute that surfaced today. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. On January 17th of 2019 at approximately 11 p.m., Jackson, which is one of his children's moms, drove to Antonio Brown's house in Hollywood, Florida, to drop off their daughter and get money for reimbursement for their daughter's hair appointment. Brown opened the door to the residence, went inside, and Brown closed the front door. With Jackson went up to the front door and yelled to Brown, asking where the money was for their daughter at the hair appointment. Brown opened the front door, and Jackson positioned herself so Brown couldn't shut his front door. Brown told Jackson she had to leave and told Jackson to get out of his way so he could get the money. Jackson yelled to her daughter to go to Brown's room to get the money. Then Brown told Jackson she couldn't be on his property. Brown refused to move from the doorway, and then Jackson said Brown used both hands to push her out of the doorway, causing Jackson to fall backwards on the ground. This was apparently witnessed by Jackson said her wrist hurt and was scraped from Brown pushing her. So that's basically the official police report. The name of the daughter is blurred out because privacy reasons. It's a minor. But I basically just read almost the exact police report, and that's what happened. And so, no arrest was made. So he was okay in that regard, but still the NFL could punish internally if they do please.
So I know domestic abuse is a touchy subject, but normally when I see domestic dispute, I am more concerned about something serious. Now, it's not like he cold-cocked her and punched her in the face. I'm not trying to diminish a domestic dispute in any light, but I do personally believe that after hearing what you've told me, it is not as serious as other incidents we've heard of in the past.
No, especially not with no video. With no video, everyone knows for the NFL, for them to do anything, there has to be video. Otherwise, they don't care. So to me, based on what was reported, this isn't such a big deal. It doesn't sound like he meant to push her down. He just wanted her out of the doorway after telling her to leave.
And especially considering the NFL doesn't always try to look for these videos either, it's possible we may never know exactly what happened here. But regardless, it's just another chapter in the wild saga that has been Antonio Brown's offseason ever since the Week 17 game against the Cincinnati Bengals. And now there's reports of him maybe being okay with coming back. It really just seems like Brown is entirely unstable, and I'm not sure what the Steelers could get back for him. Is it still worth exploring to trade him?
No way. There's no chance, because right now for the Steelers, I feel like the best they can do right now is a second-round pick, and I'm not going to be happy with that. Second round is nowhere near what I want. Because the domestic abuse charges, it's not going around the actual details, the actual police report. It's saying, yeah, he put his hands on a woman and pushed her down, and that's it. And that's what people are seeing. That's what teams are basing around. And it's just his value is right now is way, 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 way down. So I think the most they could get at this point is second-round pick, and that's not acceptable. He has no leverage, so he's going to be staying with the team if that's the best they can get.
But I guess devil's advocate, what are you risking by bringing him back?
You're risking still keeping a player that has been in trouble in the locker room all year, and with mentors like Chad Johnson and Torello, and specifically, he could force his way out of Pittsburgh still by doing everything in his power that's not going to get him fined, not going to get him suspended, but still being a nuisance to the team. So they're still risking that if he comes back. But, I mean, other than that, there's not really much else you're risking. You still got one of the best wide receivers in the game. So I think at this point, I mean, it's outweighed to at least 2018. I think they could deal with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to make those decisions. Let's put it that way. We already know about how talented he is, but at the end of the day, at what point is it too much? And I don't know. I don't know if maybe they haven't already passed that point. It sounded like it at the end of the season with the Art Rooney and Mike Tomlin press conferences that perhaps they had already seen enough. But like you said, is there ever if it got bad enough, would you eventually just pull the trigger on a second-round pick for him?
No. It's going to have to be a first, no matter what. First is the minimum I'm taking, because as long as he's still playing at a high level, I'll take the nuisance of being a locker room cancer.
All right, and we'll have plenty of the offseason to talk about Brown, but let's wrap up the 2018 season and Season 3 of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. I want to quickly thank all of our listeners for the support they've given us over the past year, or in some cases 2 to 3 years. We always appreciate you listening, and remember, we just do this for fun. We know we're not perfect, and we'd love to learn how we can continue to better ourselves, and we hope you've enjoyed listening to us this year on what has been another fantastic season for the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Looking forward to big and better things in Season 4 as well. So without further ado, let's get into Super Bowl 53, the culmination of the 2018-2019 NFL season. And it was, for everything that was the offensive explosion that was Super Bowl 52, Super Bowl 53 was the exact opposite. And I really didn't see this one coming. The lowest scoring Super Bowl to date, a 13-3 final with 10 of those points combined coming in the final quarter of the game. No touchdowns through the first 3 quarters. I think the Rams punted on their first 8 possessions, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to double-check that to confirm for you, but it was just not a good game in terms of offense. Now, it's one thing when you have a good defensive struggle where great defensive plays were being made, and there were defensive plays being made, but a lot of times, especially for the Rams, it was just they didn't get the ball. They weren't moving the ball. It was just they were getting suffocated. And the Patriots moved the ball more, and they were able to eventually score. But it was just a lot of ineptitude, it felt like at times, too. Just not very clean.
Not at all. And going back on your thing saying this is the lowest scoring Super Bowl, this was so weird. In a year that was breaking records for offensive, points scored in a season and, all that, all the offensive records, just had the lowest scoring Super Bowl. Whoever bet on that in Vegas is a rich man going into the playoffs. I bet no one did, but just insane. A year of offense turned into a defensive Super Bowl, and I guess that just tells you defenses win championships. But still, just a crazy game in that regard. But I personally think that the Rams defense played well. I think that the Rams offense played like absolute dog poop. That's really it. Because I did not feel like the Patriots defense was playing all that great. I mean, I'm going to give it to their defensive line. They worked the Rams' offensive line. But again, I just think this as a whole, the Rams' offense was playing terribly. The offensive line forgot how to block in general. And I knew they weren't good pass blockers, but, like, even in the run game, they weren't doing as good as they've been all season. And it's just been the Rams' offense had a complete collapse in this game. I just genuinely think that they played bad. And it wasn't just the Patriots' good defense. However, on the other side, I do think the Rams are playing pretty solid defense. At times, it looked bad. Like they couldn't figure out a way to cover Julian Edelman. Shows how important a slot corner is. And Chris Harris weighed in on that on Twitter. The Broncos star cornerback, and obviously we saw Julian Edelman win Super Bowl MVP because he just had no one that could cover him. In that regard, the Rams were bad, which I think we all knew that coming in. They were weak in the secondary. Aqib Talib wasn't there, and I mean Aqib Talib isn't what he has been like for the Broncos and such. And then also, just I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Marcus Peters anymore. Marcus Peters to me was good on the Chiefs because while he wasn't that good in coverage, he did decent enough and was forcing turnovers, and this year he wasn't forcing turnovers as much, so it meant he was more of a liability than anything, and we saw this come to fruition. The Rams' defensive line still did their job for the most part, but still, shout out to the Patriots' offensive line in this game. I just wanted to mention that because they only allowed 2 tackles for a loss, and one of those being a sack. But none of those came from the one sack came from John Franklin Myers. It didn't come from Aaron Donald, didn't come from Michael Brockers, didn't come from Dante Fowler. Just it came from this random guy because it's the only guy that broke through. So good for them for doing the Patriots way and taking away Team's player. Don't get me wrong. Aaron Donald was forcing pressure in this one like a madman. Anytime they left him on single coverage, which is a sin, he was doing it. But it's just they couldn't get tackles behind the line of scrimmage. And this was a run-heavy game. Sony Michel was doing great. And, I mean, Rex Burkhead only had, 7 carries? Yeah, 7 carries for 43 yards. So, Michel averaged 5.2 yards a carry, 6.1 for Rex Burkhead. The Rams' defensive line was good in pass rush, and they just couldn't get tackles for a loss, unfortunately. But, that's really all I have to say for now. What do you have to say about this Super Bowl?
Well, the Patriots, they won the Super Bowl. It was their 6th Super Bowl, and, the headlines read that the dynasty continues, that Brady and Belichick continue to win. And while that is true, I think the story of this game, I'm actually going to disagree with you. I think the Patriots defense played their best game that I've seen them play in years, actually. They played very well, and I know that I'll get this out there. Sean McVay is a really good coach. He was not a good coach on Sunday night. Jared Goff is a good quarterback. I think he's going to be even better. He was not good on Sunday night. The Rams have, a good offense, but it was not good on this night. And the defense, which oddly struggled most of this year, even though they had really high-end talent, they came to play on Sunday, but as it was not enough. The story is about the Patriots defense and what they did to Jared Goff and the Los Angeles Rams. You talked about the pressure that they were forcing. They absolutely whipped the Rams offensive line, which was voted the best in the NFL. I forget exactly what it was. Maybe it was just an NFL.com thing, but they got absolutely manhandled. Todd Gurley and C.J. Anderson got nothing going on the ground. I still didn't completely understand the lack of use for Todd Gurley. Only getting 10 carries in this game was just bizarre, and he only had 35 yards. The Rams just never got anything established. They never got into the red zone. And the one time they did at the end of the game, the Patriots came with the blitz. Jared Goff underthrew a pass. It got picked off, and that was it. They just never got anything going. The Patriots stifled them. The team that scored the most points in the NFL behind only the Chiefs this year got absolutely stifled, and they just could never figure it out. And on the other side, Tom Brady was not that good in this game. He wasn't very good, but he, like Peyton Manning in Super Bowl 50, he made the plays that he had to, and relied on a ground game that carried him, and that's all you need sometimes to win the game, and that's what it was all about. And, when they needed to move the chains, it was Julian Edelman who made the plays. And, you talked about him being the first wide receiver to win Super Bowl MVP since Santonio Holmes in Super Bowl 43 10 years ago. Let's talk a little bit about legacies. Do you really think the legacies of the Rams, Goff, Gurley, Donald, and McVay, do you really think they're tainted at all by this loss?
Not at all. I mean, the Patriots were favored in this game. The Rams weren't expected to win. It's not like the Rams are heavy favorites, and the Patriots came in and beat them up. I mean, granted, this is the largest margin of victory the Patriots have had in the Super Bowl ever, out of all the ones that they've won. But this wasn't demolishment. Granted, it felt like the Rams could do nothing, but I don't think this hurts anything. I think the Rams are going to bounce back, but I don't know. I don't know if the Rams make another Super Bowl in the next coming years, because this team they're not very good. The talent there at the end I want to say that I don't think they're going to make it there. And I say that their talent isn't very good, but the talent wasn't very good at the end of the year. Jared Goff slowed down. Todd Gurley did literally nothing at the end of the year. C.J. Anderson was good at the end of the year, but did nothing in this game. They lost Cooper Kupp early. They lost Marcus Peters, just did bad all year. Aqib Talib came back and wasn't good. It's just, I don't know. This team, if you told me the Rams didn't make the playoffs next year, I wouldn't be surprised. It really wouldn't surprise me. Sort of like the Atlanta Falcons after Super Bowl 50?
51.
Or 51?
51.
Whenever they played the Patriots. The team, you look back and it just wasn't that talented. And that's what I feel about here. I feel like Jared Goff is going to return to just being average, not do enough. Todd Gurley, I don't even know what's going on with him. The offensive line their team is supposed to fall apart on the offensive line. They might be losing Whitworth and Saffold, free agent, on a very small, center, middle of the line free agent class. He's one of the top guys. He's ranked number 2, with Quinn Spain, and I forget who's number 1. Oh, Matt Paradis. Matt Paradis, the center from the Broncos. Matt Saffold's going to be highly requested from other teams, so their offensive line is going to fall apart, and they don't have money to pay players. They don't really have money to get free agents. They gave Aaron Donald that big deal. They gave Todd Gurley his big deal, and this Rams team, I don't know. To get back to the original question of if this ruins their legacy, I think that getting to the Super Bowl might be the best thing that happens to them in the next 5 years, if I'll put it that way.
I actually think they are a talented team. I think they're a very talented team, Austin. I think I'm a little confused. I think what you instead mean is that they lack depth, because that's what they really lack. They have high-end talent.
See, I look at their talent, and they all fell apart in the playoffs. Jared Goff wasn't good at the end of the year. Todd Gurley was absolute. I'll call him bad, because he was. He wasn't. He has no surgeries scheduled, and they were adamant he had no injuries. The offensive line was bad, and it's falling apart. I don't know. I don't see them. They can't improve. They could only get worse from here. And the guys that were supposed to be talented, besides Brandon Cooks, all fell apart when it mattered the most. So I just don't feel confident in this team.
Okay, then what about Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara, who couldn't run the ball the last few weeks in New Orleans?
Yeah, but they still had people playing at the high level. The offensive line was still playing at a high level. Drew Brees was still doing decently. I mean, he obviously threw the interception that ended the game against the Rams, but they still got Michael Thomas, who's playing at a high level. Just, I feel more confident in them for next year anyway, because I don't know how long Drew Brees is going to play, but this Rams team, again, I'm going to bet on. I would bet money that they're not going to make the playoffs next year.
I think this is an overreaction, personally, to a few bad games, and even when they weren't playing at their best, they got to the Super Bowl. Yes, I know tainted pass interference penalty aside, non-pass interference penalty aside, they still went to the Super Bowl, and if they played halfway decent in this game, they win. That's really all there is to it. I guess now let's shift to something else. So you touched on Gurley. What did happen with him this year? He swears he was not injured, but he went from being, the early MVP favorite this year, along with Patrick Mahomes, to being, he had 3 touches in the first half. You can't have your franchise running back touch the ball 3 times in the first half. I'm sorry, you just can't do that.
Yeah, that's a big problem, especially that one, I guess I should say, is a lot on coaching as well, because we saw it last game against the Saints. Todd Gurley got almost no touches, and I mean, when he did touch the ball, he was bad, but Sean McVay sweared, this was going to be the game where he got him involved, and, they weren't, able to. It's not like they ever fell super far behind. They gave up on the run or let C.J. Anderson carry a lot. You look at the splits of the carries or the touches, and you look at touches, Todd Gurley has 11, C.J. Anderson had 9. So, Todd Gurley had, 11 for 34 yards, while C.J. Anderson had 9 for also 34. So, C.J. Anderson was the more effective back here. But, where was I going with that? I think I lost my train of thought. Regardless, just Todd Gurley in the last month, I don't really know what happened to him. He came back from injury and should have been okay. Maybe it's just he was scared of re-injuring it. How a player will sometimes come back from injury and they never run the same or never are the same because they're scared of being injured. Maybe that happened. I don't really know. It just kind of stinks. The Rams, I touched on it before, the Rams have no cap space. They just paid Todd Gurley. So, you kind of had to. He's a really good running back, but he's the number 1 paid running back, and now they decided to use their C.J. Anderson almost more towards the end for, the most important part of the season in the playoffs. So it just kind of sucks. I don't even know where to theorize, really, what happened with Todd Gurley. He says his knee feels fine. So my guess is that he's just scared of getting re-injured. It doesn't hurt him. He's just playing differently because he's like, all right, I don't want to hurt myself. What do you think?
I'm not going to speculate on that, but all I know is we're not going to know until next year if it was something, unless if there's a report that comes out now where it's there was actually a problem, but I don't know what the problem is, and I don't venture to guess. I venture to guess we won't know for a while. But let me ask you, do you pay the running back?
No. Nope. Complete. After looking at the draft for 2.5 years now, and after seeing what happened in 2.5 years, I am not about drafting a running back. I am not about paying a running back highly. Drafting a running back high, I should say, first 2 rounds. You just see way too many guys fall off a cliff way too fast. And I was talking about this with a friend. Sure, you see a lot of undrafted free agents and later round guys making it in other positions, but at running back, it feels so much more common. You see guys like James Conner, Kareem Hunt, and Alvin Kamara, all these later round guys just make it and do good. And now you see what happens with Todd Gurley, and you pay him the highest running back contract you can, and he just falls off a cliff like that. It doesn't even make sense. So I'm never about paying a running back. It's all about that offensive line. If you make a good offensive line that could run block, you could put basically anyone back there, anyone that's an NFL capable running back. As long as you have the offensive line, it's so much more important to me. I am never about paying a running back. Now, after seeing what happened with Le'Veon Bell, seeing what happened with James Conner, seeing what's happening now with Todd Gurley and C.J. Anderson, I am never about paying the running back from now on. Just move on. Just try and get another one and keep building that offensive line.
What about drafting?
Not in the first 2 rounds. Unless there's unless there's a guy that should have went in the first round, like Saquon Barkley, that got like I don't know, got like a charge that really made him fall back into the second round. Maybe, but like even then, you look at it, people wanted Baker Mayfield to be the Rookie of the Year, even though Saquon Barkley was amazing, and that's another point on why not to draft running backs in the first 2 rounds. Running back isn't going to change your team. The Giants still suck. They had a Pro Bowl running back. They had one of the best running backs in the league this year in Saquon Barkley. He turned out perfectly, exactly what they wanted. Still, Baker Mayfield was he didn't. Saquon Barkley did win Rookie of the Year, but Baker Mayfield, a lot of the fans wanted that instead because of the difference he makes for a team. A quarterback is going to change your team from a losing team to a Pro Bowl team, a playoff team. A running back is not going to do that. So to me, taking a running back in the first 2 rounds, unless you already have everything built up, ready for them to go, it's just a waste of a pick. And we see that. We saw that with the Giants. Had one of the best running backs. It didn't matter. That's how I feel.
All right, and just something I just really quickly looked up. The leading rusher on the Super Bowl winning team this year was Sony Michel, under 1,000 yards. Last year was LeGarrette Blount, had 700 plus rushing yards. The year before it was LeGarrette Blount, who did have over 1,000 yards. That was the year he had 18 touchdowns. And then the previous year it was Ronnie Hillman, who had like 600 something. And then just take a wild guess who the 2014 Super Bowl champion Patriots leading rusher was and how many yards this person had. I guarantee you will not get this one right without looking it up.
Brandon Bolden, wasn't it? Or something stupid like that?
Brandon Bolden had 89 yards, but you're thinking the right kind of guy. It was Jonas Gray.
Oh, yeah.
Jonas Gray.
I remember. The Patriots just go through like their 5 backs that they have every year.
And then they picked up Blunt. They picked up Blunt at the end of the year, and then they started using him because he was in Pittsburgh. But yeah, that year they had a bunch of. They had Brandon Bolden start 2 games. Jonas Gray started 3. Shane Vereen started 6. LeGarrette Blount started 1. Stephen Ridley started 5. And the leading rusher on the team was Jonas Gray with 412 yards. So only one Super Bowl champion in the last 5 years has had a running back have over 1,000 yards, and that was LeGarrette Blount 1 year.
So it just tells you, makes you think that running back does not really matter in the Super Bowl equation. I'm sure if you go back, there's plenty of teams with really good running backs if we were to look, but as of recently, this is a pass-happy league. And still, to this day, the cliche of defense wins championships still almost always rattles through. So running back, to me, is just not a very important position when it comes down to it. Sure, if you have a great one, it helps your team, but it's not one of the most important factors in what determines your team goes to the playoffs or gets the conference champs or even to the Super Bowl. It just doesn't feel like that.
So a pass-happy league benefits the receivers and tight ends, and Julian Edelman benefited greatly in this game. A wide receiver not named Julian Edelman caught a grand total of 2 passes for the Patriots in this game, and it was Cordarrelle Patterson. And if you really want, you probably don't even have to call him a receiver. He's more of a kind of like a utility guy, a running back, receiver, special teams guy. James White caught a pass. Rex Burkhead caught 2. Sony Michel caught 0. This was mostly Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski, and Edelman caught 10 for 141. You talked about the way he played. Felt like he was the only guy who could consistently move the ball for the Patriots, but he got the job done and is the Super Bowl MVP. I felt like he was the most deserving, and now they're talking about him for the Hall of Fame, and I'm going to say pump the brakes on that. I get that he has come through with some clutch performances, but he's not even the best slot receiver the Patriots have had the last 10 years.
Yeah, that would go to Wes Welker, I would say. I think that's a little bit of an overreaction. I think he has, 4,000-yard receiving seasons in all his seasons he's played. I mean, I think, say the Patriots come back next year and go to the Super Bowl, and win, and he wins Super Bowl MVP again. I think that makes it harder to say no, you're not coming into the Hall of Fame. But the chances of that happening are very low. But he's going to have to get at least 2 more 1,000-yard seasons to even be considered in my mind. Because I mean, we're looking at Hines Ward, and Hines Ward, it's comparing a kind of apples to oranges because of the type of wide receivers they are. But Hines Ward should be a Hall of Famer, and he's not. So if the people think Julian Edelman's going to make it, they got another thing coming because the stats don't stack up at all. He's not even close. It's just, I think that's a point people overreacted on. I don't know. I'm not about it. Just because he won Super Bowl MVP. You look back and you look at the other Super Bowl MVPs of late, and it's just do you think any of those guys are going to be it? What was it? Nick Foles last year? It's just winning a Super Bowl MVP isn't the same as winning an actual MVP. I don't know. You go back. Let's see. You got Joe Flacco in there from the 49ers, 49ers Ravens Super Bowl. Malcolm Smith from Seattle. He's not going nowhere. Von Miller could. Tom Brady will. Eli Manning shouldn't, but will. I mean, Aaron Rodgers will. Drew Brees. Santonio Holmes won't. I mean, Hines Ward has one for himself. I forgot to even mention that, and Hines Ward's not in there. So take that as you will. I don't know how I forgot that. I'm comparing the two, and Hines Ward has one, and he's not in there. There's no way Julian Edelman makes it in. I almost forgot about that. Deion Branch. You got anyone remember Deion Branch? Because I hardly do. It was so long ago. Dexter Jackson, the quarterback from Tampa Bay. I mean, none of these guys, just because you won a Super Bowl MVP does not guarantee you a trip to the Hall of Fame. That's what I'm trying to say.
And how many more years does Julian Edelman have left? I mean, let's compare Wes Welker and Edelman for a moment in a second here. But, Welker retired at season, it was the 13th season of his career. Or not 13th one. Sorry, 12, not 13. His 12th season in 2015 was his last with the St. Louis Rams, and he retired. That was his age 34 season. Julian Edelman's 32 right now. How many years does he realistically have left? I'm not saying he's going to fall off the map or anything, but, I mean, how many years does he realistically have left as a top receiver for the Patriots?
Really, who knows? It's up in the air. Receivers don't make it that much longer at playing at a high level. Once you get to the mid-30s, it's usually about it, unless there's something special happening. I mean, granted, maybe he'll take Tom Brady's advice and he'll last just as long as Tom Brady did. But I mean, we've never seen that for a wide receiver, really. The oldest wide receiver that I remember as a late was Steve Smith, and he wasn't even that old. Just I don't know. I'm going to say he has 3 more years left in him until he's 35, and then he is gone. I feel like he'll still play at 36, but it won't be at a high level.
So you think he'll? That's the thing about receivers. They'll produce at high levels, but some of them will taper off more grace. Some of them, they'll age more gracefully than others. Larry Fitzgerald is a good example of that. But, another guy like Wes Welker, he kind of eroded rather quickly. His last season in New England, he caught 118 passes, 6 touchdowns, 1,300 yards. And he then had 2 seasons in Denver. He had 73 for 778 and 10 touchdowns. Okay, the yardage and receptions were down. And then they continued to decline his second year there, where he caught only 49 for 464 and 2 touchdowns. And then his last season, he caught 13 passes for 100 yards and no touchdowns. So it was a 3-year process with Welker, but those last 2 years really were not that impactful. And, as can be the case, it could be quicker or the same. But I think Welker was a better slot receiver than Edelman is. I mean, Welker was maybe the best I've ever seen do it. He had a way of getting open like nobody I've ever seen before. But when it does come down to it, I will say, Julian Edelman came up clutch in the moments Wes Welker did not. You might remember Julian Edelman obviously winning Super Bowl MVP, while Wes Welker dropped what could have been a game-clinching reception in Super Bowl 46. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember it, sort of, kind of.
But, just an interesting comparison between those two guys. I think Welker would be more likely for the Hall right now. But, all right, I guess there's really not a whole lot to talk about with this game. Just, final thoughts on the 2018 season and this Super Bowl.
The 2018 season wasn't a good one for the Steelers, and the Super Bowl also wasn't a good one for the season. No more breathing room for the Steelers. Patriots and Steelers are now tied at the top in history for the most Super Bowl wins. So I really hope going forward this next year that the Patriots just can't get ahead, because it's going to suck if the Patriots get ahead in this next year. So I hope the Steelers bounce back coming forward, and I hope we don't get another Super Bowl. I just want the Patriots out of the Super Bowl. It's so terrible. I would have been so much happier with a Saints-Chiefs game or even a Chiefs-Rams. Someone needs to knock the Patriots down, please.
Hopefully it lights a fire under the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have underachieved greatly the last 7 years. 8 years ago today was, I believe, the last time the Steelers were in the Super Bowl against the Green Bay Packers. A long time ago.
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago, that's for sure.
At that time, you had to think, were you thinking the Steelers were going to get back to the Super Bowl one more time? At least one more time?
I thought so.
I did too, but alas, it doesn't always work out that way. But that wraps up, Season 3 of the Stronger Than Steel podcast, the 2018 season for the NFL, and we're now moving into off-season mode. So we want to thank you for listening and watching with us over this past year. It was a fun football season, a disappointing one for the Steelers, but still entertaining to say the least. And we're looking forward to bigger and better things in 2019, and hopefully it's a year that culminates in a Super Bowl 54 victory for the Steelers. But until then, thank you as always for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast, and we appreciate your support. And we hope you stay tuned for Season 4, which will be our best season yet. So thank you very much, and have a terrific night.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.